In the wake of the dismissal of the Tiffany Haddish and Spears lawsuit, I thought it was important to discuss how easily children are exploited and abused in Hollywood, despite the extensive child labor laws. So, according to page 6, Haddish and Spears were accused of molesting a brother and a sister when they were 14 and 7 years old, respectively. And in a lawsuit filed earlier this month, September 2022, they are both now legal adults. The alleged victims claim that Haddish coerced them into participating in explicit comedy skits titled, brace yourself, Through a Pedophile's Eyes. How they could ever think this was appropriate or funny is beyond me. And if you see the sketch, it's absolutely grotesque, inappropriate, even the title's disgusting. I could only watch it for a few seconds because it was just utterly disgusting. Nevertheless, despite the likely favorable outcome for the plaintiff, the siblings who made the accusations dismissed the lawsuit this week with prejudice, which means they can't later file or bring the case again. The siblings also released the following statement as to the dismissal, which is rich. My family and I have known Tiffany Haddish for many years, and we now know that she would never harm me or my brother or help anyone else do anything that could harm us. Spears and Haddish likely offered an undisclosed settlement to dismiss this case. Even with the case dismissed, both of their careers are over. They will likely not work in Hollywood again, and in the court of public opinion, of course, this behavior, this conduct is frowned upon, and it should be. Now, these siblings are one of many children who continue to be abused in Hollywood, despite the extensive child labor laws that are supposed to protect children. Why is that? That's probably because the people who are charged with protecting them, their managers, or even their parents, are often the violators or perpetrators or encourage the wrongdoing. But before I get into this dark topic, let me introduce myself. This is the Legal Code, and on this channel we discuss various legal topics, whether that has to do with labor laws or has to do with estate planning or small business concerns. We discuss it here. So if you like that sort of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share with anyone else you think will find value. Also, I am a real life attorney, so if you would like the opportunity to work with me to troubleshoot any areas you're having in your business, in your small business, or if you like to just troubleshoot some concerns that you have, would you like to start your estate planning, you can set up a consultation with me to get real hands-on advice to troubleshoot those areas so that you can move forward. Now, without further ado, let's discuss child labor laws, Hollywood exploitation of children, and the like, and why this is overlooked and what needs to be done for enforcement to protect these children. Now, child actors work under a different set of labor laws than adult performers. They have strict limits on their hours, and they need to be accompanied by an adult or guardian at all times on set, as well as some states require a work permit signed by the school to authorize the work on the set because that child will be out of school. These laws are put in place to protect child entertainers from being overworked, exploited. But the reality is that despite the laws, children are easily exploited, with many adults charged with their care looking the other way, or the ones exploiting and abusing the children. Now, the Fair Labor Standards Act is a federal law that requires employers to follow guidelines when it comes to employees who are under the age of 18. This law was established in 1938 and has been revised over time to accommodate the changing workforce. Generally speaking, the laws state that child actors' working hours must not exceed 8 hours per day, and his or her working time cannot exceed 40 hours a week. The number of weeks that a minor can work in a year is limited by 6 weeks, and that work must be done when school is not in session, such as summer breaks or holidays or vacation periods. By law, the education of a child actor must not be disrupted, whether that education is public, private, or homeschool. Production must also have a set teachers so that the child actor may continue their education and so that their education is not interrupted by the work on the set. A minor can also be required to work only if he or she has been granted permission by the Labor Department and only if he or she has obtained an employment certification from the Bureau of Working Conditions. Usually, production verifies all of this information that the appropriate paperwork for that child is provided before production begins. The law also prohibits employers from hiring minors for hazardous work or jobs where there is a risk of physical damage. The working conditions of the environment must be relatively safe and physically healthy for minors. There can't be like toxic fumes or whatever the case may be, or the set can't be like on a construction site. The law requires employers to also provide food and drink as well as any necessary medical treatment free of charge to the minors who are employed in these occupations. So production earmarks medical treatment if necessary for that child. That money is put aside. Now, these laws were born out of the exploitation of children who had no advocacy and who were forced to work in factories, not Hollywood. These laws were not originated in consideration of the dynamics of Hollywood, but of factory workers, which of course have inherent danger. So there's risk of exposure to toxic materials, dangerous machinery. Hollywood sets now pose different sets of dynamics that these laws don't adhere to or include. Now think back to your elementary school days when you had to read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Do you remember that? Now, in that novel, the author exposes the issues with child labor with the experiences of a Lithuanian family that immigrated to the United States. In order to help make ends meet, several of the children, minors, are forced to quit school and go to work in a factory. Now, this novel was written during the industrial era of the early 1900s. Industrialization transformed the lives of Americans both socially and economically. Industrialization created jobs and increased the American standard of living, with new technology and machinery items that were once considered luxuries became common for the majority of the population. But in order to achieve this, the necessary jobs were factory jobs, which are inherently dangerous. Factory work was horrific. Wages were low, while the hours were long, and the conditions were deplorable. The workers were forced to work even in unsanitary and dangerous conditions, many losing limbs, fingers, and they were just expected to continue on and work. Now, factory owners also preferred children to work because they viewed them as more manageable. They could pay them less, and they were less likely to go on strike. During the early 1900s, the job of a child was not to go to school and have fun and become educated like in today's world, but to be a functioning member of his family, his or her family, which includes holding a full-time job because his or her family needed it for sustenance. A job was not to teach a child responsibility for extra spending money like today. It was to put food on the table or avoid living on the street. Every dollar mattered for their family's survival. Although this account in The Jungle was based on a fictional family, it spoke to the truth of many immigrant families that required their children to be forced into labor, and there was no protection for them. So the laws on the books today, as we know, deal with the environment as well as preventing financial exploitation of minors. Now, if you're shooting in California, New York, Louisiana, New Mexico, or Illinois, child actor labor laws dictate that you'll also have to arrange for making payments into your child's Cogan account. Now, Coogan accounts are required for adherence to the Jackie Coogan law, a law protecting child actors from financial harm at the hands of their parents or legal guardians or employers. Now, this law mandates that a child actor employer must set aside 15% of the child actor's gross earnings in what is known as a Coogan trust account, where it can be monitored by a trustee, but the funds cannot be withdrawn by a legal guardian until the child reaches legal maturity, 18 years old. The bottom line is that 15% of the child actor's gross earnings must be deposited into this account within 15 days of employment. And production is responsible for making sure that this happens. So usually production has a payroll system that will make sure and arrange for these payments. But that's not to say that the parents can't take the rest of the money, or the guardian can't take the rest of the money and abuse it and ostensibly steal it from their child. Also, if we look at talent contracts, now talent contracts are obviously not exclusive to child actors. However, working with children does add a unique twist to the process. A minor can legally walk away from any contract at any point without facing any consequences. Sounds bizarre, but the reality is that as a result of the law protecting children, essentially, it simply says that a minor isn't able or doesn't have the competency to enter a contract in the first place because they're not of age. Perhaps more surprising, a child's parents are also prohibited from entering employment contracts on their behalf. So this insulates children from being able to walk away from a contract with a movie house without any liability because they're not of age to consent in the first place. So as you can see, there is intent to protect children in the entertainment industry, and adherence to child actor laws is all well and good, but adherence to basic human decency and regarding that the child is a child is far more important. Despite the protection against working hours, having dealt on set, preventing financial exploitation, there's also an element of behaving appropriately on set. This is more nuanced and harder to regulate because other than common sense and decency and an awareness to avoid certain conduct on set, there is no way to shield children from the bad behavior or dysfunction of adults that work alongside the children. Some people are just weirdos and they're going to behave that way on set, regardless if a child is there or not. Now, child movie stars who fall into substance abuse and poor mental health are an unfortunate cliche because this is overlooked and encouraged by their caretakers. Now, here are a few examples. Shirley Temple's mother, Gertrude, put her daughter in the industry when she was just a toddler. Her first credited role was in War Babies in 1932 at 3 years old. It was a sexually suggestive short where children impersonated adults, and in her autobiography, Shirley described it as a cynical exploitation of our childish innocence. She also added that if any of the children in the film acted out, they were locked in a windowless sound booth and forced to sit on a block of ice. How horrible. In her memoir, she also cited several instances of sexual harassment by studio leads during her childhood career. Many of us remember Macaulay Culkin, who was managed by his father during his childhood career. Now, he stated that his father was controlling. He had him on a very busy filming schedule from 1990 to 1994. He also said that his father made him stay up all night and study his lines for the next day. He is quoted in saying that his father was a bad man. He was abusive physically and mentally. Macaulay also said that his father was abusive to his mother and siblings. Macaulay Culkin was 15 when his parents separated, and he has not kept in contact with his father since then. And Macaulay is in his 40s now, early 40s. Now, another one that I remember as a child is Drew Barrymore. Now, Drew Barrymore's mom got Drew started in acting at 11 months old in a Dart commercial. Now, Drew comes from Hollywood royalty, and she became globally famous after starring in E.T. at 7 years old. Drew's mom managed her career and took Drew out with her with friends several times a week. After Jay divorced Drew's dad, she took the 9-year-old Drew to Studio 54, where Drew was first introduced and encouraged to dance with young male celebrities. Drew was also introduced to drugs there, and by the age of 12, she was already in rehab. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Studio 54 was a very popular happening nightclub in the 60s and 70s. The who's who of Hollywood party there. I mean, anyone who was around during that time has links to Studio 54. But it also has a dark history of drugs, alcohol. There's a dark side to that party scene. Also, our beloved and talented Judy Garland was commonly given sleeping pills by the studio to give her a bit of rest before waking up with what she called pep pills that gave her enough energy to work long hours on studio projects. At the age of 47, Garland died after accidentally overdosing on sleeping pills. And the coroner who examined her body said that it is quite clear accident, but the circumstances of the person was that they were accustomed to taking sleeping pills over a long period of time. And we also know of Brooke Shields, who at the age of 12 went to play a child prostitute in the infamous film Pretty Baby. The provocative cinematography depicted Shields in many highly exploitative scenes, some of which included her attempting to seduce a man into bed and getting sold off to the highest bidder at a virginity auction. Brooke Shields posed for Playboy also in 1975, an act that was consented to by her mother, Terry Shields. In an interview with Barbara Walters, Walter asked the 15-year-old Shields what her measurements were, indicating how tall she was and how much she weighed. As an adult, Shields called the line of questioning practically criminal. Yeah, a lot of media also responsible and guilty of exploiting children and asking inappropriate questions of minors. Now, you may ask, what kind of mother will allow her child to be exploited so explicitly and indecently? Well, money was certainly out of the question for many like Brooke Shields, because look at Drew Barrymore, who also came from an affluent and famous family. So what could have been the driving force behind their mother's exploits? I believe the motive lies in vicarious living. These child stars are usually the only child or seen as the favorite of most talented, instead of seeing the children as an autonomous individual. Now, these parents see these children as an extension of themselves. The parents want to transpose the child's wants onto their desires. And their children are seen as like a perfect embodiment of their own forgotten childhood dreams. Now, for some, the motive is money or fame, success or access. But for others, it's parents living out their forgotten childhood dreams. Now, this area is so ripe with psychological issues. The laws are in place, but the handlers, the parents, the guardians are often the ones that give the green light for abuse of the children. So if the people who are charged with the duty of protecting them are the ones exploiting and abusing the children, where does that leave us? How can these children be protected? I don't have answers. The most famous of all is film director Roman Polanski, who in 1973 was arrested and charged in Los Angeles with 6 offenses against Samantha Geimer, a 13-year-old girl. Now, he was charged with unlawful sexual intercourse with the minor, rape by use of drugs, and other sexual perversion crimes. At his arraignment, Polansky pled not guilty to all the charges, but later accepted a plea deal whose terms included dismissal of the 5 more serious charges in exchange for a guilty plea to the lesser charge of engaging in unlawful sexual intercourse with the minor. Now, Polansky underwent a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, and he was placed on probation. However, upon learning that he would likely face imprisonment and subsequent deportation, Polansky became a U.S. fugitive, fleeing to London and then France in February of 1978. Hours before he was due to formally be sentenced, he fled. Since then, Polansky has lived mostly in France and in Switzerland and has avoided visiting any countries likely to extradite him to the United States. According to Geimer, the victim's testimony to the grand jury, Polansky had asked Geimer's mother, who was a television actress and model, if he could photograph the girl as part of his work for the French edition of Vogue, which Polansky had been invited as to guest edit. Her mother allowed a private photo shoot, Geimer testified, without the mother's presence. And Geimer said that she felt uncomfortable during the first session, in which she posed topless at Polansky's request, and initially did not wish to take part in the second photo shoot, but nevertheless agreed to another shoot. Of course, she's a child, so there's this willingness to please. This took place in March of 1977 at the home of actor Jack Nicholson. When the crime was committed, Nicholson was said to be away on a ski trip in Colorado, and his live-in girlfriend at the time, Angelica Houston, who was there but left during the photo shoot, later returned while Polansky and Geimer were there. Geimer was quoted in a later article as saying that Houston became suspicious of what was going on behind the closed bedroom door and began banging on it, but left when Polansky insisted that they were finishing up a photo shoot. Geimer testified that Polansky provided champagne and quaaludes, and despite her protests to his aggression, he performed several sex acts upon her, each time being told no and being asked to stop. He described the events in his autobiography, and Polansky stated that he did not drug Geimer and that she wasn't unresponsive, and that she did not respond negatively when he inquires to whether or not she wanted to continue. It's actually explicit, so I'm watering it down. Now, the 28-page probation report submitted to the court by Kenneth Fear, signed by the deputy Irwin Gold, concluded by saying that there was evidence that the victim was physically mature and willing. Again, this is a 13-year-old girl, so they're saying she consented to this. And the officers quoted 2 psychiatrists who described that Polansky was not a sexual deviant nor a pedophile. So this was denied by psychiatrists. Now, he also received a lot of support from Hollywood heavy hitters, including Woody Allen, Wes Anderson, Harrison Ford, who all came and signed petitions for his release. As of now, Polansky remains a free man living in his chalet in Switzerland and continuing to direct and create movies. He actually worked on one as recent as 2022 and continues to be honored by film festivals. I do not think Haddish and Spears have the support and influence of Roman Polansky, so I don't see them having the same outcome in Hollywood as Roman Polansky has had. He remains at large under U.S. law and continues to enjoy his life, but I don't see this being the likely case for Haddish and Spears. They don't have the influence, they don't have many things, the privilege to these sorts of accusations thrown at them, and it not be believed by the public of court opinion. Also, the video, if you watch it, like I mentioned, is grotesque and extremely inappropriate, and I see this being the end of their careers. With that being said, I wanted to share with you what is on the books in terms of protecting children in the entertainment industry. As you can see, there's laws that are fine to prevent overwork, but the nuance aspect, the dynamic aspect of Hollywood, where it's a lot of one-on-one, there's nothing there really to protect children. Perhaps there needs to be a government body that's there to supervise child actors to make sure that they're not being abused or exploited by not only set personnel, directors and producers, but also to keep a watchful eye on the parents. So many of these parents have bad intentions by getting their children into Hollywood to fulfill forgotten dreams, and they use their children, and ultimately the children suffer. And it's a sad and unfortunate case. But let me know your thoughts if you've seen the skit. I'm sure we can unanimously agree that it was inappropriate and grotesque, but let me know your thoughts. What do you think about child actors in Hollywood? Do you have suggestions as to what can be done to better protect child actors? So with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.